Welcome back to the afternoon sessions of the Innovations Against Poverty Conference. And we have a packed program in the afternoon with lots more sessions, including grantees, companies from Innovations Against Poverty, as well as the Business Innovation Facility. Our next session will talk about what happens when things don't go to plan. Or as someone else said, does it ever go to plan? It will be moderated by our host, our local host for IAP and BIF, Mr. Andrew Kambobe. Please.
Right, thank you very much for that introduction, Ruth. I thought I would start with that little cartoon. I hope people can see it at the back, maybe even the front. Those are members of management of a company called cashbin.com, and they're having a conversation while roasting some marshmallows over using some small bill US dollars. And it says, the investors asked us to lower our cash burn rate, which might happen if things don't go to plan. And somebody continues and says, so we're using smaller bills. So just to give you, and that's really the best you can hope for when things go, if ever, when things don't go to plan. Now for just a bit of context, I'm happy because I'm coming after some presentations. So for some that are not familiar with inclusive business, there's a bit more context, and we have a bit of an understanding of the kind of environment you operate in. In most cases, as Lisa said, a lot of these initiatives are new. Nobody has ever tried them before. So you start and you hope for the best. So already that gives you a kind of idea of what's going on here. The other thing is, there was a lot of talk, if you heard in the afternoon, about affordability, which is another key thing you need to bear in mind. So, and you're operating at, your target market are people that are usually, you do not have a lot of disposable income to play with. So what that means, you yourself have to run a very sort of lean business, not enough to sort of develop market or generate, acquire customers in terms of, so that your budgets are generally tight as an inclusive business if you're going to make the product that you're targeting affordable. And of course, as we all know, most of these are early stage initiatives. And what that means is that you're still learning, like most things. So you're still developing your capabilities. Some, of course, are more ahead than others. But this is kind of the environment we're operating in. And I was very pleased to hear this morning that a lot of the IAP businesses are still feeling very optimistic. So that's a good sign. Right. So who do we have on the panel today? So in that order, first to speak will be Matthias Olsen from Emerging Cooking Solutions. He will speak more about his product, but what they have is a waste-to-energy project, taking advantage of the stockpiles of sawdust on the Kambobe Belt province. They're locally based. Duncan Ryan from the IDRI, US NGO. I think they pioneered market-based approaches. He'll also speak a bit more about what they do. Lisa Petrikowska. I've already spoken a little bit about her because we had a conversation earlier, from Ignitia, which is into weather forecasting for smallholder farmers, warning mostly. And lastly, but certainly not least, Mr. Stephen Potter from IDRI. I have introduced myself. I just sort of dived in and started talking, although I was introduced by Ruth, I remember. I am Andrew Kambobe, just for the sake of people that just joined the discussion, and I'm country manager for the Business Innovation Facility and IAP currently. Okay. So when I was thinking about this, I thought, well, maybe it's not very obvious when you ask the question, what happens when things don't go to plan, because that could mean a lot of things. And I was just going to say, apologies for the aeroplane analogies there, but it was the most obvious or the easiest way of envisioning this. So if you've course-corrected, or have you course-corrected? Have you stowed in your business? Are you struggling to maintain lift? Or if you have failed, we are talking about all those things. So I just thought I would say that. Not overly important, but some of the key things we'd like to do is, obviously the whole idea is to zero in on inclusive business in particular. Businesses overall, it's known world over, startups fail or struggle. It's the nature of it. But I think the focus for this afternoon is the uniqueness of inclusive business. Sorry. Right. Without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Matthias Olsen from Emerging Cooking Solutions. What I would like to say before we do is, please take note of any questions that you have. We'll try and rush through this and see if we can address most of the questions that after everybody has spoken. But if there are any pressing ones, we'll allow for that soon after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and it's very nice to be here. I'm going to try to find my presentation. There we go. So I'm Matthias Olsen from Emerging Cooking Solutions, and I'm going to tell a little bit about what we're doing and also share my experience of where we have course corrected and where we have had to change the way that we could move forward. And I think I would say for pretty much anyone wanting to start an inclusive business, it has to start with an idea that you really, really kind of fall in love with. I mean, that happened to myself, and it happened to our colleagues here in Zambia, and we strangely had pretty much the same idea. For myself, it was actually, I remember one night surfing on internet and thinking there has to be a solution to climate change. I mean, that is not about just minimizing and doing less bad and kind of feeling guilty about things. And I stumbled across something called biochar and kind of started to research on the fact that we can actually move carbon from the atmosphere where we have way too much to the soil where there is too little. So this is how the idea of making pellets for cook stoves started. And we haven't incorporated it yet into our business because it's a little bit too obscure, but it's on our pipeline. When we reach break-even, we'll pick up that idea and see what we can do with it. But for now, we have a lot of impact we can generate anyway. What we do is more or less this. We produce fuel pellets for cooking. And our idea is that we can produce it and sell it cheaper than the alternative. And the fuel is also better when powered in these gasifying cook stoves. On the picture, you see a stove made by Philips. It's produced in Lesotho. And in the beginning, we made our own cook stoves. It was quite hard work to do that. And we realized that we're never going to make them as good as Philips can do them. And also, we can't make them as cheaply, although ours were actually cheaper. But that was one of our big realizations, was that let's just focus on the fuel. Let's buy the stoves that are available on the market, and then we'll find a solution that we can scale up. Because we have a lot of issues with scaling anyways. Setting up a pellet factory is a big thing in itself. So we target people that have existing purchasing power for cooking fuel. This was our original idea, and that has remained true for now also. It means that we target people who already have money and who can spend less money on a better fuel. So that sounds fantastic. And our obstacle and our challenge is to get these high-quality stoves to reach the people. It may sound counterintuitive, but we kind of went for the best stove we could find, also the more expensive stove. And the reason we do that is because if you just look a little bit at the lifetime cost and lifetime savings, the best stove is also the most efficient. And in that way, the lifetime cost becomes actually drastically lower. And it means that we can have higher margins on the pellets. We can sell them at a higher per ton price. This is our production team. We have installed capacity for 3,000 tons per year. We're making very high quality pellets. It's been a long journey. It's taking us many years. But we are not worried at all about production anymore. This is one of our stove users. And this is our impact statement, which shows that we have strong impact on both environment, when we replace charcoal, we have very strong impact on environment, on health. Interestingly, people save money, women save money by choosing a stove that cooks faster. And I would like to make an analogy with a washing machine. I mean, imagine doing, laundry for a big family. It will take a lot of time. And I know that when the washing machine came into Western societies, it really transformed society also culturally. It's quite interesting. So I think that cooking stove that saves time can also create very positive social changes. And for the government, who we hope will cooperate more deeply with us, we always say that we bring an informal sector into the formal sector. We generate new, fresh tax revenue, which they don't get on pellet sales, on charcoal sales. So these are some pictures from the past. Our colleagues here, Sonta Kauti, is one of the founders, and he was the one who really convinced us to come to Zambia. We came through Swedish embassy visit here 2010, and since then we've been working together. And 3 of our other colleagues are here today also. So just to go through, when preparing for this presentation, I was thinking, what were all the things that we were thinking was going to be problems, and what actually have been our challenges? And interestingly, a lot of the things I can actually tick off here and say that they haven't been, we have managed to find ways and solutions to them, but I'll also highlight where we had to change course and what was the most challenging. So we focused a lot on pellet production. We had a lot of thoughts and concerns about availability of raw materials. Could we produce high quality pellets? What about packaging, distribution? And also, could we sell them at a price that was actually going to fuel the whole business? Because again, we are selling the stoves at cost or below cost. In some areas, we're selling them below cost so that we can recover that in pellet sales. So on the pellet production side, we've been very positively, it's been very difficult and very hard, but basically we feel that we have come very far, and we are not challenged by it at this time. On the stove thing, we made our 50 stoves or so, and then we realized, how can we scale this up? It will take us enormous investment, time, resources to scale this up from 50 to 500 or to 1,000 or 10,000. And then we found eventually when the Philips stove came around, which was only less than a year ago, we were clear that this is a way to go. Let's buy something off the shelf and let's focus on setting up the systems and integration and all these other things, which is enough challenge in itself. And we also realized that there's not much margins in the stove sales, so we might just as well not put our effort on that. So right now we are working with a Philips stove, and we're working with an institutional stove. We have that one in a orphanage here in Lusaka, and they're very happy. They save a lot of money on the fuel. It's a video on YouTube. There's a link at the end. You can see if you want. We're also experimenting with cheaper stoves. That is a third of the cost, but they are not quite as good as a Philips stove. So this is a phase of really a lot of experimentation for us. And the third category of challenges that we have encountered is on the sales side. And one big question was, of course, are people going to use it? And I put yes here. I would put with some reservation. We had some issues with the first users, and we take that on ourselves, basically, that we didn't show how our product worked closely. We sold to a forestry company that we worked with, to their employees through payroll deduction programs. And we basically sold it to men. And the women who were going to use the stove were not really informed how it worked. So we had some drawbacks there, but now we are really focusing on working with women's groups and really trying to interact more deeply with the end users. But basically, what we found is that our product is extremely attractive on the market, but there is the threshold of entry, which is the challenge. So we have an offer which is attractive on the consumable side, but we have to find ways to finance and get through that initial threshold. And we also, the distribution, everyone told us that you have to focus on the distribution, last mile distribution and so on. What we found, we did reverse engineering. I went to the big milli-meal mills here where they make corn flour, which is, everyone uses that a lot. And then we realized that 2 bags of milli-meal, 2 bags of pellets, more or less the same price, more or less the same weight. So we just have to follow that track, that supply chain, and see what are the margins they are getting. It's bulk handling and so on. And to our, good surprise, we found that retail margins on milli-meal are extremely low. Somehow it's workable for that. So with that, I'm going to turn to the next slide, where we're coming into the part with where we're now looking very experimentally at many different ways of financing the stove. We're working with microfinance institutes. We are dropping the price ourselves. We are trying cheaper stoves. We are working through women's groups. I was in a church yesterday speaking to 600 people, asking if they, and a lot of people wanted the stove, but they have to then sign up and collect money themselves. So I'm sure you're going to see a lot of results from our experience here, but it's very exciting and also very humbling to find that we have to find the ways that work in this particular culture. So to sum up, basically, we abandoned the idea of making the stoves. That was a very good decision, and we freed up a lot of resources to do that. We realized that we need to target more low-income people, because our payroll deduction programs went to white-collar workers and engineers who use the stove as a backup. We want to find people who use it full-time, who buy charcoal. So now we're focusing very much on the compounds, on the lower income levels, where people often don't have a job, but they have purchasing power for charcoal. And then also the institutional stoves has come up now as a very interesting way of selling a lot of pellets, which we're also going to look into. And with that, I want to thank you very much and close here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthias, for that presentation. Are there any pressing questions, quickly? Right, I had one for you, Matthias, if you excuse me, Duncan. Have you worked out how long it would take for the consumables to pay for the stove?
Yeah, I mean, it's roughly 6 months, something like that. So our original idea was like, we retain the ownership of the stoves, and we simply we take a small commitment fee just as an insurance and let people use it. We don't have the cash flow for that. We would love to try that at some point, but right now we can't do that. But we're definitely seeing, if we lower the price of the stove even to half, we think we can recover it in 3 months. But we experiment carefully, let's put it that way.
Right. Duncan, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. My name is Duncan Ryan. I'm Country Director of IDE Zambia. IDE is a grantee in Mozambique under the IAP, not in Zambia, but I'm going to share an example of an IDE, not really an IDE success story. We all have success stories. I think we learn an awful lot more. So we're going to have an IDE failure story here this afternoon about this thing, which is called the Mozio-Tunia pump. You need to forgive me. I'm not sure if this is going to progress as it should in terms of the PowerPoint. A little bit of a background to IDE. We were established by a gentleman called Paul Polak, who many of you may have heard of. If you haven't, then read his book, Out of Poverty. It is the Bible, the blueprint of how we should be doing what we're doing in terms of bottom-of-the-pyramid marketing. We were, as IDE, an early pioneer of market-based approaches to bring technologies to the rural poor. 30 years ago, we were talking this talk. We try to harvest the private sector to achieve scale and sustainability to achieve development outcomes. In Zambia, we've mainly been working in the horticulture sector, but we are active in developing a water and sanitation marketing program here in Zambia. What we do is we try not to get involved in the value chain ourselves, but we use a market facilitation approach to bring the various players to the table. A little bit about the treadle pump. It's an early icon of what IDE has done. It's still very important. You basically use your feet to pump water from 6 meters down. It sprays the water up to 6 meters. And it is one of the early development success stories, certainly for IDE. Lots of pictures of happy, smiling people, farmers with their crops. It is a massively transformative technology throughout the world. Through our market program in Bangladesh, 1.4 million pumps to date have been sold. We reckon that 18 to 20 million people have been raised out of poverty by IDE using the treadle pump. So not surprisingly, it's a bit of a sort of something that we boast about. A lot of the success in Asia was due to local manufacture of pumps, getting small businesses to manufacture the pumps. So we thought we'd try this in Zambia. A local adapted design. We had 4 to 5 contract manufacturers working away in their backyards, just like they did it in India. They manufactured the pump to our specifications. They didn't seem terribly good at getting kind of the fiddly bits right, so we did bits and we gave them critical sub-assemblies, etc. The supply chain, they weren't great at the supply chain either, so they didn't get involved in the distribution. We, as IDE, as an NGO, using Bill and Melinda Gates funds, created demand at field level. We paid the manufacturers, we took delivery, so they regarded us as a customer. In theory, they guaranteed the pumps. We tried to link and do the last mile supply chain through local retailers, but there was no central private sector distribution system. This was brilliant, this Mosio Tunya. We called it the Mosio Tunya. We named it after Victoria Falls. It was on our front page of our website. Look at this, success story. Failed. What I'd like to do is try and share with you some of the reasons why we thought it failed and what we learned from it. Why did it fail? How did it fail? Up to 50% mechanical failure rate within the first 3 months. The local manufacturers were too small, they couldn't produce the quantities required. And after 3 years, they still required excessive support from us. They weren't assuming any of the risks. I love this slide. Were you able to see it? Sorry. I'll read it. We can't compete on price. We can't compete on quality. That leaves us with fraud, which I'd like to call marketing. So, importantly, why did we fail? I divided these into various categories. Technical reasons. We chose the wrong group of manufacturers to work with. It might have worked in India, but it didn't work here. We didn't have a strict design modification and testing protocol. We didn't keep enough eye on what they were producing and the qualities they were producing it. And we changed the design, and we didn't do that in a proper way. Wrong technology. The technology we chose, which was a more advanced treadle pump, we should have gone for a simpler design which was more tolerant of manufacturing variances. From an organizational point of view, we deployed the wrong skill set on the project. We put engineers onto it. We should have put business people onto it. Very, very important. We didn't have any formal no-go, no-go review processes. We let it sort of meander along. Strategic reasons. We were too involved in the supply chain. As an NGO, this was seen as an NGO project. The manufacturers were making the pumps for us. There was an unrealistic support from IDE. There were too many hidden subsidies. We transported the pumps. We said it's not for free because we were going there anyhow, but still we didn't have those built in. So the manufacturers were not exposed to market forces. Very important. The costs of failure. Financial costs of remedy and write-off, brand reputational costs, implications of not achieving our project targets, and this is important, the opportunity costs of staff and resources being put into this project. I love this. Instead, you will, oh, sorry, I should have left longer for the jokes. Instead, you will spray my energy into the vortex of failure. That's a wonderful expression. Basically, we got so knotted up about this one, which was actually a sub-project of what we were doing, is that it just sucked management energy and focus, and we didn't leave us free to be putting that into other things. So why didn't we admit failure earlier, I hear you ask? We didn't appreciate that things had changed. Developmentally, we work on 5-year plans, 10-year plans. We're very stuck in what we do. The market changes very, very quickly. I'm just going to sort of push that back. Okay, we'll come back to that. It was all very personal. The people involved didn't want to admit failure. We thought we could sort it out. Oh, here we go. Sorry. So it was all very personal to the people involved. We thought we could get it right, you know. and we didn't want to admit that we failed. Never make investment decisions on sunk costs. That is the route to failure in business. I think you can read that. I love these Dilbert cartoons. They just tell us so much. Fine, yeah, it's going fine. No worries. So, failure's wonderful if we learn from it. Next time, we will critically appraise the project. What are we going to do next time differently? Is it in line with our core mission? That's assisting farmers. It's not assisting local manufacturers, right? We're looking at the bottom to it. Make sure we've got it right before we go to scale. Fail early, fail often. Don't just forge ahead because you think you've got it right. Do rapid prototyping, get out there, work out if all parts of your business model are working. Don't assume that lessons can be imported wholesale from elsewhere. Asia is very different from Africa. Asia's got a very good small-scale cottage manufacturing industry. Zambia doesn't have that. We haven't got the skills and we haven't got the things like working capital. In implementation, what would we do differently next time? Be aware of the changing environment. The way the environment changes, people saw that the treadle pumps were doing well, they started importing them by the container load, better pumps than we could produce. At that point, we should have said, job done, we've created the market, pull out. More systematic reviews of project progress. Keep looking at it. Are we on track? Do we need to change track? Greater level of external dispassionate oversight. Somebody should have been coming in once every 6 months and saying, guys, you're getting it wrong. Otherwise, people aren't particularly good at saying and getting it wrong. Actually, I can say this, one of my first jobs as IDRI country director about 2.5 years ago was to knock this project on the head because I was able to see very clearly that it wasn't working. I think I've missed one there, but you probably saw it. Differently from strategy, we've got to understand how an NGO's involvement in supply chains can alter and create market distortions. And by NGOs, I mean social ventures as well, with external money coming in. You don't want to screw up the market by your involvement. Be prepared to let failing businesses fail. The market is all about failure. If you keep propping up poor businesses, all you're doing is creating another market distortion. Make sure everybody in the supply chain has got some skin in the game. Make sure everyone's going to suffer personally if something goes wrong, and it's not just the NGO's money or the donor's money is going to go. And have an exit strategy from the beginning. How are we applying these lessons? We're doing a lot more research, human-centered design, we talked about it before. Understand your customer, understand your product. Your product isn't just the physical thing, it's how you sell it, how you manufacture it, how you market it. So we're now working with local manufacturers in our water and sanitation program. Sanitation, I've got some competition here. But those manufacturers understand we're not the customer. We're not going to buy a single one of their toilets from them. We're no longer involved in the supply chain, and we're being a lot more flexible in our project approach. One of the big successes of that project was a Farm Business Advisor program, so we're scaling that up. We're not scaling up the pump. It's not all bad. I don't know if you'll have a chance to see that. We've proven the market for the pumps. Externally manufactured pumps are being imported, and the price of pumps has been driven downwards because we've proved that proof of concept is success in itself, and we have learned. So from here, I'd advise you all to look at a website called admittingfailure.com. It's brilliant. It's where I haven't posted this one yet, but it's where you can post your failure stories and what you learned from it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would take some questions. Thank you for that, Duncan. Lots of lessons. And obviously one that struck me was incorporating decision points as you go along. As you roll out your inclusive business. And of course, during one of those points, you may just have to accept that the thing is not working and get rid of it. That's the reality of it. Are there any pressing questions? Okay, how are we doing here? Right, at this point, I will call upon Lisa Petro yes, to come and speak to us about Ignitia. Thank you. Who are also a grant recipient from IAP.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Petrokowska. I'm coming from Ignitia. I'll be pretty short today because, or actually this time, because I'll be up again on this scene in a few hours, and then I will tell you more about Ignitia and our venture. Very shortly, my background is within theoretical physics and meteorology. Before I started Ignitia, I was working on a research position at University of Washington in the US. So here I came, a researcher with a brilliant idea one day. I was at that point doing research over Arctic, which was related to climate change and especially how the polar bears could survive. And I was so frustrated because all those satellites that I wanted to have over the Arctic were actually around the equator. And so I decided one day to see, like, what are they doing around the equator? Is anyone using the data? And the answer was no. Very few used the data. It was huge data that was just laying around there, and in the tropics at that point there wasn't even a reliable weather forecast. So said and done, I thought I will take a look at this. Booked a ticket to Ghana, which 4 years ago I didn't even know it was pronounced Ghana. I thought it was like Jana. Well, maybe I should have made a little bit better background research. But I thought, if I don't go and see it myself, I don't know if it's possible to actually do this. So it started there. Well, a lot of challenges has come along this road. I decided that it would be best for all of us to be close to the market. So I took all my research colleagues with me, and they came from fancy institutions like NASA and were working with very high-tech things, and put them in an office in the middle of Accra that is a little bit different from even being here today in Zambia. I can tell you, when we traveled with a taxi from the airport today, I was just looking out the window and thinking, my God, it's so clean, it's so organized. So talking about emerging markets, they don't look the same all the time. And maybe today, if I would look back, Ghana wouldn't have been the country where I started. During this road, when we have been supported by IEP, we have had plenty of challenges, but I think that the biggest one was last year. We sent in our disbursement request in 7th of October, I'll never forget this date, and thought like, okay, great, you know, in November we will have the money in, and then we will like run the business as we thought we would do this. Well, November came and we didn't get any answers, and then December came, and then we thought on the 15th of December that we have to do something drastic about this. Cash flow was totally on the bottom, all credit cards were used. We thought like, okay, we have to survive over Christmas. So I came up with another brilliant idea. All these expats, they didn't know what to buy for Christmas present to each other. And there was a huge lack of like couches that looked nice, that we from Europe think look nice. So because Ghana didn't have any springs that could be used on couches, we took old bicycle tires that actually had a really nice spring. We got some ladies to sew those couches from nice textiles, and I think today I've sold 62 of them. It really helped cash flow. Well, it was a backup plan, and it was one that was very spontaneous. I've had several of these later on. I think just a few months ago, when we also had a small dip, I started selling long yard beans. They're very, very long beans. And then, of course, I branded them very nicely and said that I'm only using weather forecasts to grow these beans. That's why they are so long and nice. Well, but back to the real struggle. Taking something that is state-of-the-art in science and then trying to implement it on a market that is rather undeveloped is a huge challenge. And I thought I was aware of this when I started this. A lot of things has changed along the way. One of the things that's changed was that we were supposed to put up a radar system, but because of this delay of funds, we instead decided that we couldn't wait for this to happen. Rainy season started, everything got muddy, nothing was possible to install at that point. So we went on and thought one more time about this. Is it possible to solve any other way? So my crazy scientist at that point came up with an idea like, yeah, let's put out lightning detection data all over, because there is a good correlation between heavy rainfall and lightning detection. Maybe we can that way correlate satellite data and get a rather good picture of what is going on in the atmosphere. Said and done, 2 months later, we had the system working, and we launched just as we expected on 1st of June. We had done a lot of marketing in advance, so we knew we would have customers that would join this. But the 2nd of June, we had 2 farmers. The 3rd of June, we had 3 farmers that had joined our platform. Thought like, what are we doing wrong? And the 4th of June, thank God, 2,000 showed up. So it was all sorted. We were a little bit late with the information, maybe. Yeah, so I think that if I summarize this trip as what I have learned personally in building a company, especially in emerging markets, is that it's great to have backup plans. And sometimes those backup plans might seem a bit crazy, but they might be worth trying anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, I won't spoil that for you, so I won't say anything about that. That's remarkable. Are there any pressing questions? Can I now call upon Mr. Stephen Potter from the Imagine Rural Development Initiative? I have to tell you that he's made special effort today, putting on a tie. I've never seen this before. So.
I call it my penguin moment. IDRI and entrepreneurial endeavors in Zambia. Okay. Where do I begin? 3 years ago, I was really tired of the corporate world, and I decided I had enough. So I went home and I told my wife, I'm actually not taking out a new contract. We're going to do something different. So this moringa tree came up, and it was brilliant. 96 nutrients, 48 antioxidants, all the amino acids. I mean, you know, it's a brilliant product. It's a miracle tree. So I said, okay, I tell you what. I've been through villages in Africa, in Zambia particularly, where no cars go. And why is Africa not developing? Why are we sitting with malnutrition scaling from 5% to 33% in certain provinces, when we have this tree, you know? And nutrition is needed everywhere. It's needed in America, it's needed in Europe. I mean, you can't go wrong. If you've got a good product, you can't go wrong. So I tell you what, I said to my wife. I said, we're going to move out of the house. I'm going to resign. And we're going to move into a tent in a village. Okay? Because if you've got the resources, if you've got the land, okay, and you've got the product, then there's no way that you can fail. Yeah? So my wife is very understanding. She moved me into a tent where we had to fetch the water. No hot water, so I had to make a compost shower quickly to heat the water, to bath in. And I started planting moringa trees. I started to fill little jars, get stuck without petrol trying to sell the jars because all of a sudden I didn't have the income. But we worked it up. We worked it up to a scale where we had our nursery, we had our oven, we had about 700 trees that was harvestable at that time. And then the chief got taken to court. And we lost the project. A year's work, just down the drain. Sorry, you know, why? Luckily, the IAP came along and they gave us a grant. So I said, okay, it's time to rework this now. By this time, my wife was not smiling as much anymore. So I said, it's time to rework this now. So we were training farmers, sensitizing people, because nobody knew about moringa to begin with. There was a few people that knew about it. So we started with the marketing overseas, sensitizing, getting partners to work with, blah, blah, blah. The IAP came in, and like my partner there, November came, October came, November came, December came. We had this big women's group that we were training, 10 at a time, 33 groups. And I thought, really, you know, it's easy. It's easy to take those people and show them that malnutrition is actually not necessary, you know. And because the funding was late, we could not keep our financial obligations. So they took us to court, to labor court. Not for the days that we paid them for training, for the days that they were not on training. Okay. Second disaster. So we started for the third time. And we said, we have to change. By this time, we have planted smallholder farms, and we poured a lot of money into it because we had to do the seedlings ourselves. We had to plant it for the farmers ourselves, and eventually, to save some forests, I did the weeding myself. So we said, no, this is also not a workable model. In the meantime, we have done marketing. So now we're sitting with a market that says, where's the moringa? Because we did the marketing a little bit too well, and the planting a little bit too bad. You know? Well, it went bad with the planting. So we had to reshape about 4 times what we have done. We had to restart twice. And whoever starts anything in Africa, in Zambia in particularly, it's sometimes very difficult because your entries to market and your systems that set up in the country is very, very, very difficult. Your ISO standards overseas for food is very high. So you have to work past all these things. So we had to reshape. So what we have done at the end of the day is we have created a two-sprung approach. Moringa has got the potential to go where spirulina is today. I don't know, how many of you know spirulina? Why does the woman always know this good stuff better than the men? You know how big spirulina is today. Now, moringa is where spirulina was 15 years ago, when I was hunting for it in little health shops in Cape Town, you know. And a health shop will get in and you will go and buy 20 jars and give it to all your friends because you can't get hold of it. Well, that's where moringa is now in the market. So we ask ourselves, okay, we promise people that we're going to actually create economic development. And we promised ourselves, because the real calling for the moringa project was actually wiping out malnutrition. I don't really care about old people, but small people interest me. I mean, you know, we have to do what we can. So what we have done is we have taken it and we said, okay, you know, it's beautiful to want to plant this only at communities. Okay, but the standard that the communities can bring to the table at this stage, before we actually get major funding in, is not suitable for the overseas market, because the standard is not there. And although we got a 20,000 euro IAP grant, or CEDA grant, it's really not enough for a Kickstarter business. It's really not enough to actually develop processing plants, buy a seed, get the seed in the ground, train people, and everything. So we had to rethink the whole model. And what we have come up with is a two-sprung approach, where we have commercial farmers that plant moringa, okay, where we can do the development for the processing plants with their funds, because they want to go commercial, and we can decentralize the processing plants in such a way that we can split them up and then eventually get them into the bigger growers, into the local communities, and voila, we can bring that products in as well. As far as the market segment of moringa goes, you know, as like all entrepreneurs, I spent 3 months, 18 hours a day studying moringa. I could tell you everything by heart, how much matter will come from a hectare or a square meter, because all the information is available on this wonderful thing called Google. And it looked great until I started planting. Then I realized, listen, you know, they have achieved these figures with very high input cost, and I am not going to get close to it, planting seeds and little trees in Africa. We have, however, moved to the stage in the project where through Rutgers University in America, we've now got free synthesized products, which is great, because the other problem of moringa, although it's very healthy, and it's brilliant, it's a brilliant detox, and it does everything. The oil from the seeds is one of the best cosmetic oils that you can get. It sells for about $30 for 1 liquid ounce, which is ridiculous. We'll make it cheaper. But it's a very, very horrible thing to take. Moringa tastes bad. I'm sorry, you know, my wife uses it religiously, and my partner, Ollie, there, uses it, but he's a health fanatic. I'm not a health fanatic. I like my steaks and my milkshakes and all those, you know, unhealthy things. So I can't use moringa. So although it's a very good product, we sat with this problem that it wasn't being taken up by the market because of the taste and the color. It's green. Nobody's going to eat green shima. Okay. So now we have 3 products that's actually tasteless. One is colorless. So we can scale this up. I believe that within the next year, our tonnage export for moringa should stand at about 300 tons per month within the next 12 to 24 months. So whenever you fail, learn from it. Whatever happens, you know, if the chief loses his land or one of your women's groups use their land, just stay with it, because it's not only about the money. It's a factor, very important factor. But if you just carry on, it will work out. Thank you.
Right. So Steve highlighted the challenges of not only doing business at the base of the pyramid, but having them, low-income people, as your suppliers. And he talked about some of the challenges, which included the quality of some of the things they provide you, and how they are adapting to sort of address that. At this point, we'll start taking some questions. We're not only interested in questions to them, but I would also like to hear some different perspective or another take that somebody has. So let's sort of have an interactive session. Okay? Are there any questions? I'm sure there are questions. Right.
If failure is so useful and for business and people should learn from it, why is it so stigmatized still? When we all know that we can learn from it, we all know we can improve ourselves from it. Why do people still dislike admitting it? Just some views on that. Anyone has?
Right. Do you want to go, Duncan?
Without wishing to sort of blame everything on the donors, I'm going to. At the moment, I don't know what seed is like. I know DFID and USAID. They want success stories. They've got to report back why their tax dollars or tax pounds or tax kroner or shilling or whatever are all being spent in Africa instead of building schools in Britain. So to put failure stories on the DFID website or the USAID website isn't good politics. So therefore we are driven by, I think to an extent, the donors' priorities, which are to show that everything is wonderful. And that's, I think, just common to everything that politicians do. You know, when was the last time you heard a politician stand up and say, "Got that one wrong"? You know, I think they call it deferred success or something like that. That's my personal view and not the view of IDE, by the way.
Right. Right. Anybody else want to add? Yeah.
I think it's really a social meme, you know, that we have bought in, that, you know, you should not fail. You should actually keep a certain standard. But if you really come to think about it, if anybody in this room actually really look back at their lives, you will see that in the good times, you haven't actually learned anything. You've just enjoyed them. Okay? But it's really, the times that we fail is really the disguised blessings in our life, because whoever you are today, you know, was shaped by the mistakes that you made and not really by the good times, because you did not change in the good times, you just enjoyed it. And I think it's a paradigm shift that we have to go through, you know, where we say, you know, there is no failure, there's only feedback.
Wait, Karen. And there's another person at the back.
Obviously, as the manager of a donor project involved in this sort of thing, I have quite a strong view. I think that BIF and IAP have been good projects because they've taken risks. They've been allowed to take risks by the donors. And I'm happy to hear that IAP is going to continue. BIF is continuing, but they're trying to de-risk it, and I find that quite sad. We're taking a market systems approach. We have to work in particular sectors that we understand thoroughly, and we have to be looking for projects that are going to achieve systemic change. So no more taking a punt on a few things that might have huge results, a much more, you know, analytical approach, so, which I'm not sure about, even though I'm involved in it now. So.
Is that your opinion, Karen?
Sorry, if I could just sort of follow up directly on that. In my opinion, any grant fund which is supposed to be innovative, where everything succeeds, the fund has failed because it wasn't innovative enough, because to be innovative, there's got to be a proportion of failure. So if they say all 58 of our projects succeeded, I'd say, well, as a grant fund, you probably failed because you weren't taking enough risk as a fund. That's okay. My personal view, and not the view of
I think Paul had a hand up at the back. There was a hand up at the back.
I had a question for the lady from Ghana. I wanted to find out how they are making money from weather forecasting. Because I remember last night we were arguing with my daughter on weather forecasting. She was telling me now, weather forecasters were just lying because you say it will not rain or it will rain and it rains. So I said, no, but we're dealing with probability, so probability is not 100% correct. So that's what we do in meteorology and climatology. So I wanted to find out how you're making money. Like in Zambia, we've got weather forecasting, which is on national television, as well as on the website. And if you subscribe, you get an email on what happened, or like 7 days weather. So I want to find out how you're making money so that I can see how that can work out for our local situation in Zambia. Thank you.
Well, to answer your question very fast, without going into details in our business model, we are charging approximately $6 per farmer per season to get this information straight to his phone. I don't know the particular situation in Zambia, but at least in the tropics of West Africa, the information that is today provided on BBC or on Google Apps or whatever you might find out there is most of the time wrong and not correct. And this is one of the things that we are fighting with, because we wanted to find something that would be useful, that would definitely be more right than wrong. And that's why I also think that farmers are very prepared to pay for the product.
Can we have some questions from this side as well? The other side is dominating.
Thank you. Still on the forecast, how do you package the forecast in such a way that it's easy to interpret by, for instance, the small-scale farmers? I know that if you talk about the intertropical convergence zone hovering over Lusaka, it won't mean anything to the small-scale farmers. So how do you repackage the language so that it's easier for the farmer to interpret?
Well, if you allow me 30 seconds, I will tell you a little experience about this. We had booked in that the IEP team would come and visit us in July, I think, and we launched it 1st of June. And we had this idea already earlier on that we will do symbols. We don't deal with text. We don't deal with languages. We deal with symbols. Very, very simple. You know, a cloud with rain means rain. A cloud where sun sticks out means no rain. However, this technology, since we were no mobile experts, didn't really work out the way we wanted. It looked different on every single phone and didn't make any sense whatsoever. So the first 2 weeks, it was a total chaos to fixing this, but then we got a hold of a mobile expert that could explain to us how we should send this text message so the symbol would remain the same all the time, no matter if you have a Nokia from 1990 that is, you know, made in China, or if you're sitting with a fancy smartphone.
Thank you for that. Question from this side? Nobody? Does anybody have a perspective or experience they want to share quickly? Okay.
Thank you. I'm Olli Soppela, also from IRDI. And my perspective, do I need to stand up? Okay, maybe you can see. So discussing about failure here, and especially in this kind of donor-funded projects, I don't think it's, according to any market law, fair to say that we are trying to set up all the solutions with just donor funding, but we are actually coming up with concepts that could be scaled up and could also be given to other actors in other places, so that if we know what works well, so IAP gets that information and can also share that information in other places. And if there's a failure, then IAP has also the knowledge that don't do it this way if you try it. So in that sense, it's anyhow market research which gives positive results or not positive results, but there are anyway results that then other businesses should also take advantage. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Right, so just a few quick takeaways from our point of view. I think unlike big organizations that innovate to compete, I think what we heard today is that inclusive businesses sometimes have to innovate to survive. And we also heard about the need for backup, which is very, very, the more high-sounding word is risk management and, of course, mitigation. But that's exactly what Lisa was talking about. I think as a small business, you're not exempt from thinking about risk and how you can mitigate. So that's very important. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attention. And thank you, of course, the panelists for participating. Thank you.
If you want to enjoy the rest of Stephen's slides and pictures, he had a few more, as well as all the presentations that you've seen today. They will be available online after the conference as well at the inclusivebusinesshub.org. You find the web address at the different signposts here and there. Let's see now. So it is time for us to do 2 parallel tracks again. Philanthropists, foundations, and different kinds of donors are channeling funds into programs like Innovations Against Poverty to benefit the poor and marginalized people, as we heard here. What have been learned from this? If you want to discuss this further and even get more details from the report that Suzanne presented earlier in the morning, you can join CEDA and PwC for a discussion in the second room. So that is in the room Luangwe, if you go through the exhibition. So that session will start in 2 minutes. She wants 2.5 minutes, I can tell. So we're just splitting. And in the other track here, we will be talking about investment and funding, getting investment ready. So you can choose what you want. You can stay here, or you can walk along with Jenny and Lena. So I welcome GroFin and Tugende. Good. Yeah. Do it very quick because we're starting in 30 seconds. Okay. No, you can't go there. Okay. You're welcome to move seats. If you want to sit a bit closer, now you're so spread out. You can move up front. We're still waiting for a panelist. He is here, but went out. But we're getting started anyway. In this session about, both are on the theme of good business and showing good results. And part of that is the access to finance, of course. It is the issue that really unites entrepreneurs worldwide. And with something that everyone struggles with, regardless of business focus, regardless of geography. We keep hearing that again and again. So it was therefore no surprise to us that in this survey that we did this summer among IAP grantees, that this came out as the #1 issue, access to finance. And hence that's why it's on the topic of the program today. And how to become investor ready? Well, someone called this a masterclass, but obviously, if you are taking part in an incubator, you normally spend days on the subject. How to set it up, how to pitch it, all the different advice. But you are a select and very smart audience, and most of you have some experience from this. So we thought, for you, 45 minutes will probably be just fine. So what I'll do, I will introduce the topic a little bit. Besides doing IAP, I'm also running a impact investment network which is associated with Tonic. So I will speak more from a private investor perspective as well. What are the common expectations that we have? What are the investors looking for typically? If there is such thing as an average, that's part of the dilemma. We have the panel with us then in GroFin, which is one of the impact as investors that are actually expanding here in sub-Saharan Africa, where access to finance is in particular difficult and challenging. So it's a great joy for us to have Shibamba Lopa on board as well. And then we will hear, when you've heard it from sort of us as funders' perspective, well, then you will actually hear it also from an entrepreneur's perspective, if these views are actually the same or if they differ. So that will be presented by Michael Wilkerson from Tugende, which operates in Uganda and is one of our newer innovations against poverty grantees in the portfolio. So one could pretty much draw this picture, that funders live on different planets. This is what the experience is from many startups. They start looking at, where am I going to get funding from? Who am I approaching? So you have governments offering sometimes grants and loans. You have something called venture philanthropists, and then venture philanthropists, business angels, which might ask for 0 to medium return. It can vary a lot. And there are typically few restrictions with some flexibility in decision making. You might have multilaterals that work together to provide grants, investments, return by results, and more rule-based activities. Then there are the commercial banks, require return and volume, of course, very often to get as a startup and someone who hasn't quite got the track record yet. Foundations, grants may ask for no return, but may often have a high risk in terms of how you use funding. They might be involved and protective about their own reputation as an NGO, in particular when you're getting into income, and some say we are going to also be profit-making. How does that affect an NGO and a foundation? One that is fairly recent as well is looking at, and what we see as quite a few of the entrepreneurs in our portfolio are kind of switching to when it's difficult to find funding, and somebody who may come also from an NGO perspective as they set up their activities and business operation, is to look at corporates, to try to get income by doing sponsorships, trying to be included in CSR programs. And of course, capital can be provided that way. And if we look at total money that goes into startups and into inclusive business, social entrepreneurship, of course, this is a planet on the horizon, but it is definitely increasing. If we would, on the other hand, look at the funding from the company's lifetime and company's perspective, nevertheless, majority do rely on own capital. The family and friends are the first angels to really look out for you in the early stages. There are some seed capital, then depending on what country you're based in, obviously, seed capital can be accessible or can be quite tricky to find. As you're getting up to some kind of scaling, this is usually when venture capital or direct foreign investment can be of interest as well. But we will discuss a little bit about the particularities of that, because there is quite a gap between these. The seed capital, business angels, and then up to the venture capital, we have a considerable time gap. So in a nutshell, and this is something for each of these topics, we could talk a lot about that. We could say the difficulty in early stage business is assess the value as well as the potential social or socio-ecological impact that you might have, means that the first thing investors tend to start to look at is the entrepreneur. Who is this person who's proposing me this idea? Is this the person, is the management, or is the founder or founders? Are they people that I feel actually could provide value to me, or can I provide value to them as well? Focus and size of the market tend to be the second thing. Is this something that could grow? Is there an interest? Who is the market? One thing we find over and over again, and when I speak at incubators as well, is that we try, often many companies are too general about who is the market. It's not enough to say, I'm going to run this business and scale it up in Zambia. We have to be very precise about our target market. Who is going to buy the service? Who's willing to pay for it? And if we have a model whereby somebody is subsidizing the product or service sold to the poorest, for example, well, how else are we targeting people that are getting us the income? Competitive edge is quite natural. I don't have to explain that, I think. But then we have risks again. Risks do come back, and risk aversion, political, regulatory, timing of potential revenues, etc., the delays, is something that comes up again and again, especially when we talk with business angels, venture capitalists. Risk is one thing that comes up on the table quite early on in discussions. And how can we deal with that? I'll come back to that. The last thing on investment readiness, well, is it actually a good idea for you to even consider external capital? Sometimes it feels like almost a given. It's a size that your business is growing, that you should go out and ask for funding. But we have different choices between equity, debt, etc. Different choices here that needs to be considered. As we are preparing for investment into an organization, there are 4 major things, if we split it this way, to consider in the preparation of this and getting investment ready. And there are a number of points under each of these, and you can download that from the, again, from the Inclusive Business Hub. There is an IB checklist called Is Your Inclusive Business Investment Ready, which details more of this. But the first thing, structure. Do you have evidence? Is it actually incorporated? Who's on the board? Some of these legal structures around your company is very important to see, is it investable? The market is not just about being precise about the target market, but do you understand it? Can you show, as we've discussed in the previous session, about the market intelligence and research, do you really understand their needs? Which leads you to show that you have a competitive advantage, hopefully. Financials. This is something I often struggle with together with entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs hate numbers. Most don't want to see them. They say, talk to my accountant. Talk to my accountant about numbers. They tell me. But you must manage your accountant. The accountant will partly do what you tell them to do. It is so important that you make an effort to learn the basics of financial management for your company. How else would you be even able to discuss valuation of your company? What is X $500,000 worth into your organization? In exchange for what? What did they expect? And so forth. Or when we look at cash flow and returns and so forth, I can't stress that we have to dare to meet also the numbers. Finally, the sell. Provide evidence for a solid business plan. Very much about the sell gives people the conflict of time. I'm trying to prove results. I'm trying to give the track record to be investable. At the same time, I have to spend time chasing investors like GroFin and others. This is one of the biggest challenges. We tend to do one or the other and underestimate the time it takes to really sell yourself and go after the investors. With that, I shall hand over to one of the investors. So GroFin has quite recently got an office and established himself in Zambia as of the 1st of January, but has been operating since the mid-2000s in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, a warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Ruth. When I was asked to do a presentation on how to become investor ready, I went through quite a bit of things, trying to come up with the right things to say. I should have just, when I spoke with Ruth, said, I should have asked her, what is it that you have? Because what she has actually put up now is, I'll probably just be echoing everything that she has said. But good afternoon again. When I was asked to do this, I thought the first thing, even before I talk about being investor ready, is to first get the people here to understand what kind of an investor we are, and also bring it out to you that we are an investor in the market, in the Zambian market, and we're ready to play. GroFin, just a little background on GroFin. We're an multi-award winning multinational fund manager. We are present in 8 African countries and in 5 countries in the Middle East. And we are focused on sustainable investment in the small and medium enterprise space, with the vision of seeing committed entrepreneurs with viable businesses or ideas being able to access the funding in terms of actual money and support they need to succeed. GroFin was established in 2004 out of South Africa, but we are based, our funds for Africa are based in Mauritius, which I think has a more liberal financial system. And we currently have about 400 million in management across the African continent. This is just a little visual about the countries in which we are currently operating. In the Middle East, I'm missing out Iraq there and Saudi Arabia. We are in Saudi Arabia and Iraq with our hub out of Dubai. So about our business model. We combine funding with business support in all the investments that we do. We do not go in with one without the other. And our decisions to invest is based first and foremost on the entrepreneur. Is the entrepreneur robust? Is the entrepreneur capable? Is the entrepreneur committed? Once we buy into the entrepreneur, we then buy into the business. Is it viable or is it potentially viable? Bearing in mind here that we work with businesses at various stages of development. Just a little negative clause from the very beginning, we do not invest in primary agriculture, which in a Zambian perspective would refer to your average rain-fed agriculture, your maize, your wheat. We do not have expertise in that particular aspect, and we are of the opinion that the entrepreneurs in this particular aspect have very little control post-production. And it should be noted here that we look at a lot of factors as we're pricing for a particular investment, and it depends on the risk profile that we are availed. It is important from the outset to say, from a GroFin perspective, who an SME is. We have 3 factors, and you only need to qualify in any one of these 3 in order to be considered SME. And from a Zambian perspective, quite a lot of enterprises operating would fit into this area. You need to employ less than 150 people, a gross assets of less than 16.5 million kwacha. At today's rates, this would be around $3 million. Turnover, 27.5 million kwacha, about $5 million. To be borne in mind here is, this is the upper end. So you'd be able to qualify as long as you're below these thresholds in any one of the factors. That works for us. In terms of the activities that we support, we have already actually in Zambia invested in a number of startups. We invest for expansion. We invest for acquisitions and also rescue operations. Let's say those companies that are troubled and need to turn around, we're able to invest in those as well. Why do we support the SME sector? The usual you hear from all various investors, SMEs are a crucial catalyst for local sustainable economic development. But obviously the major issue that we have found is that our investments, we structure for each particular investment as opposed to having a one-size-fits-all. So we provide appropriately structured finance and support for SMEs, and this assists in driving long-term employment and other related social benefits. Just for your information, a lot of our investors are actually development financial institutions. So the impacts that will derive from the investments that we make are very, very important for us. One, to continue accessing funding in terms of investment, and also for us to also feel that we're contributing to a greater good in terms of the investments that we're making. What is it that we provide? Access to appropriate finance or capital, access to business services and assistance at all stages of development, and an enabling environment. An enabling environment in this sense refers to our dealings with the various regulators, policymakers. In Zambia, we have taken a very active role in dealing with government. Actually, one of the first things that we did when we came into this particular market was act as at the invitation of DFID, to act as the lead advisor to the president and what is called ZBAC, the Zambia International Business Advisory Council, which advises the president, as a lead advisor on SME development for 2013. So we also do a bit of work with the Zambia Development Agency just to try and get it to accept the peculiarities that SMEs face and develop policies that do help in that area. And this also stems from the fact that we think entrepreneurs in this sector are underserviced with very few capable partners. Ruth did bring up a whole spectrum of investors that would get into this space. At a personal level, and this is pre-GroFin, I spent about 20 years working in a commercial bank. We were not very friendly to SMEs. We would ask for all sorts of collateral for guys that are in the very early stages of development. If you do not have any historical financials, we won't even talk to you. So that's the kind of scenario that I'm coming from. The last 1.5 years has obviously been very interesting in the sense that you sit and you talk to guys that just come with a concept, you buy into it, and we end up investing. So it's a totally different ballgame to what I spent most of my life doing. So we match business needs with the most appropriate finance structure available. We invest debt, quasi-equity or equity. So depending on the profile that we think fits the particular investee company that we're working with, we'll then be able to work with them and find what it is that works for them. They may come in today and ask for a pure debt investment from us, but we think that their cash flows will not permit that. We would then go in with an equity or a quasi-equity perspective so that then they're able to build enough internal critical mass to have some organic growth, and then they would start paying back. So all these are perspectives that we look at. Currently, we are investing for periods of between 4 to 6 years. We should, in the next year or so, graduate back to 10-year cycles. And our investments in dollar terms range from $50,000 to $1.5 million. Kwacha will levitate from around 250,000 to around 8.3 million based on the current rates. Business support is a very important selling point from our part, and is something that we believe in we believe makes a very big difference from the other investors that are in the market. We want to grow with the business. We want to work with the business as we move on. Where we do have an equity stake, we actually get a seat on the board and help from the policy-making perspective. Where we just do pure debt, we have our portfolio managers who will work with entrepreneurs in the business to ensure that, one, the basic principles of our investment are followed, and we advise on a consistent basis. We also will identify various risk areas in the client business and work around ways and prepare, so we work with entrepreneurs, the strategies that will make these things go away and success and profitability to fall in. As I said, DFIs are major investors in our funds. So we are impact investors. So the number one impact, obviously, that we want is commercial sustainability, because that guarantees that we will get paid back, that the entrepreneurs will become rich, that they'll continue employing people. But also, we look at the social impact in terms of job creation, gender benefits accruing, what leverage is gotten out of every dollar that kwacha that is invested, how many people in the general community are benefiting from the particular investment. There's a governance aspect as well, which would not be a prerequisite for before we make the investment, but as part of our business support, we would like to have this in place as we work with an entrepreneur. Environmental safety and health are obviously very important impacts that we also track. So when Ruth asked me to talk about being investor ready, I thought to myself, if I had 3 words, what would it be? And for me, I would be very happy to work with an investor that knows their business. So just know your business. When you know your business, it's very easy for us to work with you. It also makes our decision-making much quicker and therefore responding timely. So Ruth did allude to these things which I'm about to talk about right now. So there's the issue of financial information. Oh yeah, sorry. I would have done with the one. So yeah, there's an issue about financial information. Keep all the information about the business. And from a Zambian perspective, especially on the SMEs on the lower end, there's really been very little distinction between my money and my company's money. And among the things that we would like to see is that clear distinction. It also helps the business in a very big way to manage the cash flows. And for us, cash flows are a very important element for a business because that's what keeps you running. Understand your business in terms of the product or service that you offer, your competitive edge, because this is what will help us buy into your business as well, the market you're dealing with, the competition, where you're located, is it ideal? What are your distribution channels? How well do you know your suppliers? Do they have a major control over what you do? What would happen if your supplier just cut you off in one day or they closed? Have a clear plan for the future. If you operate on a day-by-day basis, it's very difficult for us to have a buy-in. You bring your plan, we believe in your plan, we follow it, and we succeed. So it should go through the various aspects of the business, from your human resource side, your sales, your marketing, and various other aspects of the business. Know your operations, both from a technological and an operational point of view. How are you using your knowledge to make the business more efficient, the technology to make it more efficient, and the governance structures as well. I mean, do you have a board in place? What is the distinction between management and ownership? How is it work? I think the lady from, I think the company is Delight, talked about formalizing structures, making a distinction between the ownership and having into a CEO-led organization. The owners, it's very important. We actually want to work with owner managers. But they should be able to move away from just being the guy who started with the money to thinking about the business and leading it into a great future. So for us, a business person with this level of readiness will show us that they're committed, one, that they're competent and able, and of sound character. And this will show that they have the ability to run a business successfully. We are not putting our investors' funds at due risks. And in that way, we will find it very, very easy to work with entrepreneurs at this level. As part of my slide, these are things that you will be able to see when it's put on the portal. But we talk about a few other risks that Ruth had earlier alluded to: the human capital risk, the financial risk, the credit risk, and the external parties risk, which will include the political environment. These are risks that will be overlooked in a lot of scenarios, but it is extremely important that you as entrepreneurs, people behind the idea, take cognizance of all these and ensure that, and we will work with you to ensure that success does come both our ways. With these words, I take leave. Thank you very much. Be open to questions.
I'm sure we might have some questions. We can take them immediately now, if you have. At least what I heard you say, Shivamba, is that you're very much open for proposals today as well.
Definitely.
So you should take a chance.
Definitely.
Ask all the questions you need. Yes, do we have one here? Yep.
Yeah. You mentioned somewhere that you identify the entrepreneur, and entrepreneur has a plan, you agree, and you follow the plan, and then you both of the parties succeed. But most of the cases in traditional business, and especially in BOP business, plan doesn't work. So as an investor, of course it depends on the entrepreneur, how much flexible they are to change the business model and go forward. But their decision also depends on what investor is thinking. So as an investor, what's your opinion that how do you deal with the entrepreneurs and changing business models?
I said from the outset that what makes us buy into a particular proposal is one, how robust, capable, and committed we see an entrepreneur to be. So yes, I mean, life does not work in a straight line. Changes to the original plan will come into effect. They may be positive or negative. We should bear that in mind all the time. A business may perform much better than they had planned. The thing that works for us is because we have our portfolio managers working with the businesses post-investment, we are able to see these things as they are coming. And we therefore prepare strategies to work around them. If it is positive developments, to exploit them as much as possible. If they are negative, to see how we can mitigate against them to ensure that we succeed. So that is how we work towards these distortions to the original plans.
Stephen? We need the microphone. Sorry, it's going out live, so we need the microphones.
We're currently working on two aspects of our business. We received the protocols for the end products and how to manufacture them, actually Saturday night, just before we came here. And the other aspect is capacity. And one of the interesting things is what you said is financial management capacity. Okay, something that I as an entrepreneur really don't want to get involved in. You know, it's like there's the humanitarian aspect to me that I need to keep out of finances. My wife says I will give away my shirt. So your organization, if I heard correctly what you said, also actually works on that capacity scale with the entrepreneur. So all I need is your business card.
Yeah, I mean, we're ready. We are situated, our offices are just a stone's throw from here on Parliament Road. We will work with you to formalize all those things. from the financial management perspective to all other aspects that would need development in your particular business. But obviously, one thing that I probably didn't mention is that even pre-funding, we do provide pre-finance business support so that whichever business we're working with, we bring to a GroFin-ready scenario. So, yeah, definitely, anytime. Even we can have a little chat today, then we can go from there.
Perhaps you can mention, what is the most common kind of support that you provide?
The financial side is the most common. A lot of people do not, I mean, if they're keeping some Excel sheet financials, that is pretty brilliant for your average SME. But obviously, we would want to grow from that scenario to one where they have very formal financial packages in place. But obviously, this also goes with the fact that they may not have the financial resources at the very, very beginning. We have gone through some toolkits that have been made possible by some institutions like the IFC, for instance, that help in a very big way for startups. You can download them and you can be putting all your information and it all comes and starts making sense at a particular level. So from a starting point of view, the IFC SME toolkit would be quite brilliant.
Yeah. Can you say something about, I mean, you're quite recently established here in Zambia, but nevertheless, and with some of the restrictions you put up here on the slide, how do you view your pipeline? Do you get enough investable companies? Because this is a complaint I often hear. Investors complain there aren't enough good businesses to invest in. On the other hand, entrepreneurs can't find investors. So how would you say, what would you say about your situation?
Pipeline is there. It needs a lot of pre-finance support. So we actually end up doing a lot more work prior to getting into the approval system. So that is the one challenge that we are facing. But what we have also been doing is working with various business member organizations and the Zambia Development Agency and ACCA Zambia. We've participated in a number of conferences, actually sponsored the major SME conference in Zambia just 2 months ago, to try and drive the message of SME entrepreneurs being ready with the requisite information. And it's something that we've kept on driving. Taken us quite a bit of this year. So I hope we can start reaping results in the coming year.
Any last question? We will be able to have a few more questions after Tugende as well. But did we have one more in the back? We're in the front.
Hello. You mentioned that you do both debt and equity. Most of it, I suspect, is debt, or do you do, I mean, what is your experience of the relationship between debt and equity? How much are you doing? And then maybe you can just explain, what do you mean by quasi-equity?
Both debt and equity together.
A mixture of them, yeah.
Both together.
But what is your experience with those two?
At the moment, we are at around the 50-50 stage, half debt, half equity. We haven't done any pure equity deals yet. But for one of the investments, the larger part of it, about 80%, is from an equity perspective, with only a 20% debt. But what we are also able to do is, because of our ceiling of $1.5 million, we are able from time to time to find various other investors for those projects that require investments over and above our thresholds. So one of those is one which we have financed in that manner. The other guys that have come on have actually financed a larger amount than we have. So we do, from an income perspective, obviously the equity deal is sweeter for us. We make more money in the long term, but we also take a much greater risk. Any failure will be 100% failure, as opposed to a debt perspective where we may take collateral. So we are open to both. I would rather do more equity than debt, but I mean, it all depends on the kind of investment that is into a particular business. If it's something that's going to start making money quickly, why go in the equity route? If it's something that we have to be a lot more patient with, we go in equity.
Okay, thank you. We will now hand over and hear it from Michael and Tugende. Tugende has fairly recently closed a round of $200,000 in investment. So Michael can tell us how long it takes and all about it. Please.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for staying awake for me. How many people here are entrepreneurs or work for a social enterprise? Okay, great. Okay, perfect. So I know for a fact that there are people in the audience who've raised more money than me. So I'll just start with the caveat that I was telling somebody at lunch that I used to be a journalist before becoming a full-time motorcycle tycoon. So I'm very good at learning something quickly and then telling others about it as if I'm an expert. So take it with a grain of salt. I want to tell you about our experience because we applied actually for our IAP grant almost exactly a year ago. And at that time, we had between 30 and 40 active customers. But I told CETA, listen, we're going to raise $300,000 in the next 12 months. Your grant's going to be part of it, and it's going to help us become more investment ready. And I'm sure they read that and thought, yeah, right, but maybe there's some potential. But I'm proud to say that, in fact, over the last 12 months, we've raised $330,000. We've actually got a new investor, since I told Ruth the numbers, of which $250,000 is private investment. So what I'm going to talk about today is our experience suffering in that missing middle that there was a mention of in the last presentation, where we were too successful, or we had enough cash that a lot of grant makers wouldn't talk to us. But at the same time, we were so high risk that risk-averse grant makers and many investors, including impact investors, said, this isn't really for us, you need to get further along. So we were able to bridge that gap largely with individual angel investors, and I want to tell you a little bit about how we got there and how we appealed. But before I do that, just very briefly about Tugende. Tugende means let's go in Luganda, the most common language in Kampala, the capital of Uganda, and also in a number of other Bantu ethnic languages, it has a similar meaning. So Tugende means let's go. And we finance motorcycle taxi drivers. So how many people here have ridden on a motorcycle taxi somewhere? Great, yeah, they're in many countries in Africa, South Asia, and essentially you get on the back of the motorcycle and you go. And so in Uganda, especially the capital Kampala, motorcycle taxis are a great way to get around. You don't have to sit in traffic, they're more economical, and unlike the cheapest public transportation, they actually move relatively quickly. So motorcycle taxis are a great way to not be stuck in a traffic jam. And they're also a major source of employment. We estimate that there are over 100,000 motorcycle taxis in the capital of Kampala alone. But the vast majority of these guys do not own their motorcycle. They're renting the motorcycle from another owner or a landlord and paying that person weekly. So Tugende was started while I was in Uganda working as a journalist and got to know a few really great drivers and said, hey, oh, these guys are really cool. Wouldn't it be nice if actually they could own their motorcycle? So that is our model. Drivers pay us weekly 15% more than what they would be paying to rent, but they get to own the motorcycle after 18 months. At that point, their take-home income doubles, but both on the path to ownership and at ownership itself, there's a massive psychological benefit to knowing that the thing you use to make money belongs to you and is in your control. And we believe there are safety benefits to that as well, but I'll get back to the investment. So motorcycles are a big deal, not just in the city. In rural areas, they help people get from the deep village to sort of the next size up town, and they're used both for people and goods. So I love motorcycles. I can talk about them for 3 hours, but I just told you about why owning instead of renting is a good idea. So when we started doing this, we got massive demand. We have had almost no marketing in the life of our company. So we officially started in late 2010, but I will say that we rebranded and sort of moved to taking this company seriously about a year ago. So we've been around since 2010, but I would say as a serious social enterprise, we've only been operating and trying to grow for about a year. I mentioned, oh, this is a nice separation of the E there, Tugende. So we have seen our drivers, after owning their own motorcycle, go on to spend the extra income on things like building their own house, buying cattle for their extended family in the village, and putting their children in the next tier up of schools. Because like many countries in Africa, Uganda nominally has free education, but the difference between the free primary education and the first level of primary school is extremely high. So just being able to afford to pay a little bit can have a massive educational benefit. So we don't see our goal as trying to tell people what to spend money on, but rather to enable them to take home more. So that's about us. And this was supposed to talk about the psychological benefit, but let me keep moving. So how did we approach investment? I decided to move back to Uganda full-time after being back and forth over 2 years while also doing a master's degree to become a motorcycle kingpin full-time. I decided this was a much better idea than getting a real job. At that point, we had given out about 70 motorcycles, of which about 25 had been fully repaid. And we were profitable on a week-to-week basis. We were making money. So my decision to move back actually knocked us out of profitability. So we had to decide, what are we going to do? And I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. I'm deciding to do this full-time. We've got a huge waiting list. We've got a model that works. Like, investors are going to be all over it, right? We're profitable. We have cash flow. But it was harder than that. So we had to take the approach, and are still taking the approach, of being what I would call a minimum viable company. So there are things like really great financial planning or financial reporting packages that we haven't been able to afford or put into place, and we've had to get by keeping our expenses down. And that's definitely been hard, especially talking to some of the bigger potential sources of financing, because we don't have what they want, but we know that what we're doing works, and we are building towards becoming much more robust as a company. Nevertheless, how did we raise $300,000? Well, the short answer is we were able to prove that what we were doing had a market. We didn't need to go out and convince people to buy what we were selling. We just needed more money to buy more things to then sell. So what I would say to the entrepreneurs out there who are thinking about this is, ask yourself, first of all, why do you need money? It's nice to have money. And this is a big problem in the NGO world as well. People go out and seek financing because having a lot of money makes life easier. You can buy a car, you can get a nicer office. But how is it actually moving your company forward? If there's a way to get by without raising a lot of external money, I would advise anyone to do that. I should say as well that our approach to investors has been to look for people who are very risk tolerant. The reason for that is we're a young company, we might fail, but also we're giving motorcycles to young men, for the most part, who we don't know very well in Africa. And if you go to a developed country and you say, we've got this great idea, we're going to give motorcycles to these guys, it sounds pretty risky. And the company started with me and a few other founders putting in money from our personal accounts that we were willing to lose in its entirety. And if you don't have investors who are willing to lose all of their money, they're not going to be a resource to you if things go wrong. So in order to get investors, we were able to, first of all, show demand. So this is a picture from our office on one of our application days. We have so many people who hear that we are giving essentially loans for motorcycles that want that option, that we can't keep up with processing them, so we had to move applications only to 1 day a week. On Wednesdays, if you're in Kampala, you can come apply for a motorcycle. And we were able to show that to prospective investors and say, look, we're not trying to prove that there's a market, we're just trying to expand our participation in it. And so that really helped us go a long way. Equally, we were able to show that we would put money to work immediately in a return-generating activity, buying more motorcycles. So while we have spent money on some things like improving our internal systems, the vast majority of that $300,000 has gone directly into inventory, which we then put out on the road. The second thing is we've had a clear plan with milestones, and that was very appealing for a lot of our investors. And just to be clear, where did this money come from? We mainly got private individual angel investors, but not the Silicon Valley kind with millions and millions of dollars, our median investment size in this round has been $20,000. So mainly upper middle class people, mainly in the US, who might otherwise invest this in their friend's restaurant or some other startup. So it's very much friends and family type money, except I didn't know most of these people before. But we were able to convince them. So this was our goal. A year ago, I presented this slide, and this was our hope, that we would be able to raise this money and get from a few dozen to a few hundred motorcycles, and that things would go wrong, but we would fix them along the way. And I'm proud to say we've made it there, but a lot has gone wrong. But it helped that we could show investors, look, your money is going almost entirely to motorcycles, and we're going to use our returns, our own revenues, to spend on the other things we need to expand. So if you can show investors that you're not going to burn their money and then come back and say, sorry, we built this software thing, but then Google released a free version, the money's gone, that can help a lot. And that was definitely the case for us. So I've talked a lot about what I think made us appealing, but I also want to just give a few pieces of unsolicited advice. What kind of return are you going to offer investors? Because especially return-oriented investors are going to immediately ask, okay, what's my exit? How do I get out of this? And almost across the board, I have had to say, I don't know, but we're gonna do debt. So our investment has been structured as convertible debt, which is something I don't know if anybody else has talked about today. I'm happy to talk to anybody personally about this later, but essentially what it means is we signed loan agreements with our investors that said if we sell equity later, the initial loan investors will be able to convert their loan into equity at a discount. So they get rewarded essentially for investing earlier. But what that does is it keeps us from having to put a value on the company. What's the value of 250 motorcycles zooming around Kampala plus like me as a robust, passionate entrepreneur and then like a few chairs and computers and stuff? We don't know. We don't know. And we didn't want to have to put a value on that. So we've essentially kicked this down the road. But what it does is it gives us the ability to promise to pay back a debt return, and it protects the investor in case we go out and get millions and millions of dollars from somebody like GroFin. The earlier investors won't be diluted, or they won't make less return than a later investor. But again, if your return abilities differ from the expectations of your investors, it can create a lot of trouble. If you take money from somebody who's going to want to pull it out in a few years regardless of how well you're doing, that could be a serious challenge to future growth. And equally, if you sell equity to somebody who's going to come in and tell you how to run your own company in a way that is not complementary, you'll be in trouble. And so we were very concerned about control as well as about not wanting to value our company. Equally, you know, I think you have to be sort of, I don't want to say committed, I want to say shameless in chasing money, especially for those of us without a serious history of audited financials. You have to go out and tell people that what you're doing is great and that they should give you more money to do that. So I participated in an incubator called the Unreasonable Institute, which was fabulous. And if anybody's looking to go through an incubator, especially looking to scale up, I highly recommend the Unreasonable Institute. But even there, I was with 20 other really great people with their own venture, and you have to be very, very aggressive at going to funders, going to mentors and saying, please spend your time and resources with me. Now, I'll tell you, after the Unreasonable Institute, once again, I thought this was going to be easy. But it turns out that my most valuable resource was actually a few early investors. So people who said, oh, this idea is great, I love the demand, I love motorcycles, let's make this happen. So I was just saying, networking, schmoozing, this is how you meet people. And I literally got an investor in August because I was wearing a t-shirt that said Boda Boda, which is the local name for motorcycle taxis in Uganda. So just to reiterate the shameless self-promotion element of raising this kind of money, small angel investment, or the kind of investors who aren't going to put you through 6 to 12 months of due diligence. The other thing that has really, really helped us with angel investors is having a very, very clear story. So this is a guy named Farouk, and Farouk is now on his second motorcycle with Tugende. And after he finished the first one, he kept driving it for a while and pocketing the profits, and he used those to accumulate essentially a herd of cattle. It was actually a few different types of animals, but a whole bunch of animals in his home area. He then sold them and built apartments. Now, when I say apartments, I don't mean like a high-rise, but a series of one-room living quarters, which he then is now renting out to some of his relatives back in the home village, and at that point he came to us for a second motorcycle. So to be able to explain to somebody that, listen, what do you use to make money? Do you use a computer? As a self-employed individual, I should add, not all of us have work computers. What if you had to pay somebody else to use your laptop every day? And they might have to sell it if their mom gets sick. That's the situation that most of our guys are in. They don't know if they're going to have the motorcycle on an ongoing basis, and it's a very good deal to switch to renting, to leasing to own for almost the same price. And making it very clear and very obvious has also helped us with a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, that's why I decided to get a mortgage, and oh yeah, that makes sense, and it seems like these guys are getting a fair deal. Yep. Okay, sorry. So the other lesson I've learned the hard way is that you need to make it easy for people to say yes. One of the ways that we did that was not negotiating individually with investors. Once we had a few early investors, we had a convertible debt agreement, and we said these are the terms. We did not sign an overall umbrella agreement with all of our investors, but we said to our later investors, you're going to get the same terms as everybody else. Take it or leave it. And that actually made things easier because it reduced our, it reduced choice. Essentially, people could say yes or no without getting too deep in the details and starting to argue about small things. Equally, we had one person who said, well, I need to invest, but I need to see that you're spending all of the money just on motorcycles. And that was annoying and frustrating, but we agreed because we were anyway. So if you can make it easy for somebody to say yes and not get too bogged down in small details, that will help. And then the last thing is that social proof really helps. And you can see that by the pooling of larger impact investors in already successful ventures. But you can also have that happen in a small case like us. So we had a few media stories, we had a few partners like CETA who came on board and gave us a lot of credibility. And then, as I mentioned before, early investors. So this is us celebrating our 200th customer. This is our staff. And the guy on the left in the green shirt was my first investor. And he came to Uganda for another project, but he was able to celebrate with us. That guy has gone to his friends and colleagues and connections and closed more money for us than I have or than anybody else has. So that's my tip. That's how we raised $330,000 roughly in the last 12 months. And we're getting ready to do it again, to go from 250 to 2,000 motorcycles in the next year or two. So thanks very much, and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, that's worth an applause, definitely. Okay, as you can tell, coffee is waiting outside, but we sure have time for 1 or 2 questions for Michael. Anyone? Or you want to take it during the coffee break? Yes, here's what we have here. Morten, he was behind you, or in front of you.
I'm just curious, regarding your business model. What is the plan if the market is saturated?
So, yeah, I perhaps didn't clarify this. We think the market is already saturated with motorcycles. However, most people are renting, and we think there's enormous potential to convert those people into customers of ours who get to own their own motorcycle. So we're not picking people up off the street and saying, have you ever thought about riding a motorcycle for money? We're saying, if you are renting and want the opportunity to own, we will provide that to you with some responsibility checks. So we, yeah, let me just leave it there for now.
Okay, now we have the second question over there.
What's your retention rate for paying back the loans? And I have another question that, are you also thinking to go into rural areas with bikes, with cycles, I mean?
So on a weekly basis, we collect about 90% of the money that we expect to collect. So we're not measuring our returns like a normal MFI. There's a reason that most MFIs tell you they get 99% payback, because they mean of the original money ever. So we're tracking it on an on-time basis. But we do have stolen motorcycles from time to time. Most of the time it's not our customers who are the ones stealing it. But so we factor that in. I think over the life of our company, we've lost about 5% of our portfolio value in stolen bikes. But that's a level we're comfortable with because it's actually cheaper than insurance.
And the second question, would you do bicycles?
Oh, so we haven't done too much piloting of what we'd like to do in rural areas, but we think that motorcycles are still a huge growth opportunity and helping people own their own motorcycles in rural areas because they help people get long distances faster. So right now we're talking with a dairy cooperative where the farmers either rent a motorcycle or they just go to the road and hire a motorcycle taxi guy to help get their milk to the processing facility at the slightly bigger village. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. There's also agricultural extension workers, salespeople, anybody who has to move a long distance on not very good roads can use a motorcycle. So.
Okay, thank you very much. We will have to continue with questions over coffee, I think. And so if we can please try to be back at 3:35, that would be great. Thank you so much.